And yeah, I need that. Okay, so worldviews, and the title of this, Worldviews in Western Civilization, actually doesn't necessarily have to be in Western civilization. It's just the worldviews we have out there today in general. And do we have this on? Let's see. Yep. Okay. We're going to get to going here in a second. If you look at this chart, I'll be referring to it back and forth. We got on one side, if you turn it sideways, you have meaning of history, ethics, which means what's right, what's wrong. How can we know truth? What happens at death? What is humanity? And what's ultimate meaning? And then going across, you got some of the different worldviews. For our all intents and purposes, we're going to look at Christian theism. Of course, you could have the broad, just theism, but then under theism, you would have what three major world religions? Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. But we're going to be focusing on Christian theism. And then, of course, deism, naturalism, nihilism, and then existentialism, Eastern pantheism, New Age, Post-Modernism. And you say, oh, my goodness, I thought I got out of college. I don't have to worry about this anymore. Okay, well, folks, this is life. And whether you're aware or not, these different worldviews are washing over you daily. All you have to do is turn on television. And the trouble about it is, if you don't recognize them, well, quite frankly, you might be snookered by some of them, okay? And so before we get started, a book I recommend, I meant to bring my copy of it, but I didn't. Universe Next Door, James Sire. I had the privilege of meeting him at a little session up at Mahia, of all places, a number of years ago, actually 2 different sessions. And his book is highly recommended, and some colleges still use this as a textbook even today. Very basic, fairly readable, and you know it goes through these and other worldviews if you're interested in pursuing this more deeply. So we need to take every thought captive, and we actually have scriptural backing for that statement. So who's got the mic? Matt, can you grab that mic? Oh, you can do it. If you would start us off, Jeff, with this first verse there.
For though we walk in the flesh, we are not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ. Okay. How many are familiar with that verse? Good. Get more familiar with it. Some little key points here. You know, a lot of people think that I'm just inadequate to handle this. You know, I'm shy or whatever it is. Listen, you may not be, a great, theologian or philosopher, but we have the Word of God. And let's see. Who should I pick on? I'm just kind of curious. Noah. How do they train a bank teller to recognize a counterfeit?
Probably looking at knowing the real thing really well.
Yeah, y'all know this. Yeah, when we have bank tellers, they had to, even today, you have to worry about somebody trying to pass a counterfeit bill. And what they do is they get their tellers to memorize a real bill. So if they're just doing bills real quick, it would just almost subliminally pop up at them that something's wrong with this bill. Our brain can take in gazillions of features subconsciously that we may not consciously be aware of. But if you go through what is the bill supposed to look like, you will recognize a counterfeit. And so one thing we need to focus on, the Word of God is our primary book. Now, I'm going to recommend some other books here. I already recommended one. But the Bible is absolutely the primary book that we need to be focused upon. And if you have that, you will start recognizing counterfeits, particularly in worldviews. And it says we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion. How are you going to destroy an argument? A better argument. But how do you know your argument's better if you don't even understand where they're arguing from? You see? And by the way, as we go on, this is it's not simple. As we're about to see, well, let's just let the scripture do it for us. Okay. Zach, could you read that? Somebody get the mic over there to him, possibly? Brother Jeff, you got the microphone? Yeah. And just pass us down your road after this, Zach.
But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do it with gentleness and respect, having a good conscience, so that, when you are slandered, those who revile your good behavior in Christ may be put to shame.
Okay. Always being prepared to make a defense. And this is where I think we as Christians really fall down a lot. Sometimes we're a bit lazy. I think the modern church is failing in that, quite frankly, there's a lot of modern churches now, they don't have Sunday school. And I know they have home groups, but how often in home groups do you actually get into the Word in a very deep way? Some home groups do, I'm sure. But I used to joke with my students, when it comes something that's of a theological nature or something dealing, that references Christianity, and you're teaching Western Civ class, that comes up quite a bit. And, they're just totally biblically ignorant. And so I used to make the comment, I guess you flunked Sunday school. I can't say that anymore because they don't know what Sunday school is. Wow. It really is sad. So we do need to be prepared to make a defense. And let's go on. You got our next person there?
Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God. And we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned.
Okay, some translations say they're foolishness. So what's the solution here? When you're talking to someone who's not a Christian, do we have a little problem here? We got a big problem here. So what must you before you have that conversation, you should bathe this in what? Prayer. Because ultimately, it's kind of a cliche with Christians, but it's very, very true. You cannot save anybody, right? Only the Lord can save. And and by the way, though, this takes a lot of pressure off you. Our responsibility is to study, show ourselves approved. Our responsibility is to do our homework. Our responsibility is to love that person and to share with that person to the best of our abilities and leave the results up to God. That should take a lot of pressure off of you. And even if you have a conversation, you feel like, oh, I just totally blew that. It is amazing to me in situations in the past where, I felt that way, and God used it. He can even use your mistakes. Now, that's no excuse not to study and be prepared. But, really, what I have found, most people who come to Christ, quite often, the best intellectual arguments you can ever think of, that's not what did it. It is genuineness and someone coming into contact with a person who truly befriends them, shows compassion towards them, show that they are sincere and that they really love, and that they have studied and they do know their stuff and they do know what they believe and why they believe it. That can have huge impact. And so just be aware of that. Then, if, next person, Jackson.
For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse, for although they know God, though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him. But they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools.
Okay. Now, I think the key phrase here is, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. You see, it's not that people don't have enough evidence. You walk out this room and there's a universe of evidence of God. And they suppress the truth. It's not that they cannot believe, they choose not to believe. Okay? And what's going to change that? Well, that's where the power of prayer comes in. Only God can change a heart. And so you just with these verses and these are just very important verses as you go to do evangelism too. Be aware of these, But with this as sort of our biblical, try and position ourselves to go forth, let's do that now.
Where was that found?
Oh gosh, you got me embarrassed.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay. I forgot to put the citation up there. All right, our worldview affects decisions we make, even what we eat. If you were a Hindu and you leave here, of course, probably wouldn't be here for services if you're Hindu, but if you were Hindu and you go to lunch, are you going to go to a burger joint? All right, why?
They don't eat cows.
That's right. I mean, something that basic is how worldview can affect you. Literally what you eat. Our goals in life, that is going to affect your decisions and what your goals in life are going to be. It's going to affect your decisions in terms of your possessions. What's the correct view of possessions for a Christian? Do we truly own anything? We are stewards, right? They're given to us, they're on loan from God, all right? But, others, have totally different views of that. And then, of course, the big thing is how we treat others, right? Can have huge impact on that. If you're a naturalist who really believes that we're total accidents, that we're just blobs of protoplasm, is that big of a thing to, decide that, hey, you can take the life of a child, is that a big deal? No. Right. Okay. So anyway, a person's worldview determines how the events and situations of life will be understood, accepted, and acted upon. And worldviews also affects, the big, what I think Faulkner used to call the eternal verities, okay? And so what are these? 4 big questions. Who am I? Where did I come from? Or origins, not just of yourself, how about the universe as well? Why is the world messed up? And this is an interesting one here. One thing that we're going to run into this thing about all worldviews, we're all just trying to get to the same place. That's so bogus. We're about to get to that. But one thing all worldviews do agree on is that we are messed up. If you stop and think about it. I don't care what the ism is, it agrees that we are really messed up. And of course, when you get to why we're messed up and how you're going to correct that, that's where the argument starts, right? But they do agree on that. And how can we fix the problems? Or is there salvation? And then, what is my purpose or, and purpose in life? In other words, what's the meaning of it all? And without purpose, there's no meaning, is there? Okay? So, your worldview should be able to answer these questions. And this gives us framework for understanding reality, physical laws, gravity, science, moral laws, ethics, why do we believe adultery, murder, stealing is wrong? Most worldviews agree they are, although some have very difficult justifications to say that they believe they are, believe it or not. And then, of course, wisdom, knowing the proper use of knowledge. And where do we get our worldview? Well, nowadays, and by the way, everybody has one. You just may not be aware of it, what yours is. Hopefully, it's Christian theism. We picked these up today from parents. And really, for the young people in here, you're going to reach that point, some point. Do I believe this because I believe this, or am I just believing this because Mama and Daddy told me this? All right, that's going to be an interesting point when you get there. For some, it's earlier than others. I know with us, my little Hannah she's not so little now, she totally, utterly just stunned her mother and I after a church service. Letty was discussing, I may get this wrong, Letty had the initial discussion, but I think Hannah were you about 6 or so, Hannah? Yeah, she's about 6 years old. And we said something came up about God and everything, and Hannah says, "Oh, Mom and Daddy, I know y'all believe that stuff, but I don't know if I believe that." That blew us away, And long story, but she certainly came to faith. But it's amazing, and the honesty of that. You do need to come to that point. Why do you believe what you believe? Are you really believing it? And so a lot of people pick up from parents, friends or neighbors, and school. Some of those ideas are particularly bad. And then, of course, here we go. TV and movies, I think, has used to, a biblical knowledge was so permeating our society that it provided a common language. You could just make a biblical reference and everybody know what you're referring to. Increasingly now, to do that, you had to make a reference from a movie or a secular song, to communicate. And once again, I think that's failure of the church to properly biblically educate their people. You certainly can't expect the schools to do it nowadays, or their public schools. All right, so these are just common phrases. We did this last year. Grab all the gusto you can. That's more my generation. I don't think that commercial's out there anymore. May the force be with you. Everybody recognizes that one. And God is like a cosmic clockmaker. What's true for you may not be true for me. The cosmos is all there is or ever was or will be. Okay. Jackson, can you tell me what the first one, what worldview would that refer to? Any idea? Grab all the gusto you can. That's, hey, y'all want to chuckle at Jackson? We'll open up to everybody. Who would say?
That comes from a beer commercial.
That's a beer commercial. That's right. Grab all the... I'm curious, which one? Okay. I don't remember myself. Okay. Well, let's don't care about that. But anyway, what worldview is that? I can see why you could say that. It's actually hedonism, right? Hedonism, okay? Do whatever brings you pleasure, okay? Now, of course, let's ask Brother Robert here. May the force be with you. Star Wars. But what worldview is it? What worldview would that be?
Whoa.
Huh? It's pantheism. Yeah, pantheism. And God is a cosmic clockmaker. That's deism. What's true for you may not be true for me. Situational ethics. Well, no, actually, that's existentialism, although it's bled into postmodernism. Okay? And then the cosmos is all there is or ever was or ever will be. Who knows who always famously made that quote? Carl Sagan. And therefore, naturalism, which is another way of saying atheism. All right. So, these things are familiar with us, but, we hear these things. And this, once again, just illustrates we are, in many ways, we're back to the same challenges of the early first century church. We really are in many, many ways. You got to remember, a lot of these worldviews may have had different names, but they were present. They've been around since the beginning, really. And so let's go through a few things here. All worldviews are not equal. Now, does that go with the general political correctness that we have in society today? What does the world say? They are equal. You want to just shut that down real quick with somebody, say, okay, you believe all worldviews are equal. You are going to teleport back in time to ancient Mexico, Tenochtitlan, Mexico City, and you're going to be top of this pyramid, and you're going to be the human sacrificial victim for that day. Do you still want to say that all worldviews are equal? I think they would suddenly decide, no, I don't think I like that, I mean, we got Montezuma, 20,000 sacrificial victims in one sacrificial period. We really want to embrace that society, But you know what? So, people don't do that anymore. Okay, let's fast forward to Mao Zedong, and you are a peasant, and you're in this little village where they came by, took away all the grain, and so you're going to be one of anywhere from 40 to 50, 60 million people who are going to slowly starve to death. You want to embrace that worldview? It's called communism, All right? Yeah, all worldviews are not equal. Don't buy that. All worldviews make exclusive truth claims, okay? Even the ones that say that they're all inclusive. Ravi Zacharias, me years ago, I was listening to one of his tapes, and he illustrated this beautifully. He was giving a talk, I forget what the topic was, but a professor who was a professor of philosophy, this was somewhere out in California, and he raised his hand. He's very upset with Ravi. He says, you're just all wrong. You see, you're using either or reasoning. And, Christian theism, definitely, two contradictory things cannot be right at the same time, right? And he says, no, you can't do that. You need to use both and reasoning. And then he was using, this philosophy, which was an Eastern philosophy, to come up with that. And I don't know where he's Buddhist or where he's Hindu, but Ravi comes from that part of the world, and he knows all about that. And Ravi says, well, that's not the topic of my discussion today. And he just kept coming back and says, but you're using this either or reasoning. The correct way is both and reasoning. And Ravi says, okay, if you buy me dinner, we'll have a discussion over this. But let me finish my talk here. So he finished his talk. They go to have dinner. And the guy, they order dinner. And Ravi says the guy who's talking to him, his stuff was congealing because he's all just so hyped up to show Ravi how wrong he was. And, they go back and forth, either or, both and, either or, both and. And finally, Ravi stops and he says, okay, so you're telling me that he's all inclusive, everything's inclusive, and all this kind of stuff. And he says, so either I use both and reasoning, or I use no reasoning at all. And the professor just eyes popped open, and he realized hopefully y'all just realized, what was he doing? He's using either or to try to prove both and. Do you see the inconsistency of that? Okay? And Ravi then stops and says, and by the way, if you're in India and you're walking across the street, you look both ways before you cross, because even in India, it's either me getting across the street or that bus is going to run over me. Okay? And by the way, in most scientific labs, and you're dealing with chemicals, especially explosive chemicals, and you put two chemicals that are going to result in the bang, you're going to discover either or usually is going to work out, okay? All right, not the both and. And so worldviews, even the ones that pretend to be inclusive, ultimately are exclusive, okay? And so, all worldviews attempt to answer major life questions, okay? I think we've already established that one. All right, now, the trouble I find in America, and particularly American students, is that we tend to look at all these worldviews, particularly movies, they just conglomerate them all together. And it makes no logical, rational sense. That's the reason there's so much incoherence out there. There's the reason there's so much chaos out there today, is because people are just willy-nilly picking these worldviews. And it's invaded the church as well. I can't remember off the top of my head what article I was reading a number of years ago, is talking about, they did the survey amongst evangelical Christians. And I believe the numbers, I could be incorrect here, but I believe 30% of quote-unquote evangelical Christians said they believe in reincarnation. Are we supposed to be believing in reincarnation? No, we're not, okay? Once again, failure, just educating basic biblical knowledge here. So Steve Turner is, I understand, is kind of a historian of music in England. He's a poet, and he's a Christian. And he decided a number of years ago to write a poem kind of making fun of where current thinking's at. And although this is actually a little bit dated, I think he did this back during the Cold War, as you're going to see one of his lines illustrate that. But he's just, now this is tongue-in-cheek. This is not what we as Christians believe. This is what, actually it fits postmodernism quite well. So let's just read through this and just look at some of this reasoning in the poetry here and see if you've heard some of these very arguments, okay? This is a creed I have written on behalf of us, all of us. We believe in Marx Frodarian. And by the way, so much of the problems out there, it goes back to communism, Marxism, it goes back to what I call Darwinian psychology, and it goes back to, of course, Darwin himself. So we believe everything is okay as long as you don't hurt anyone, to the best of your definition of hurt, and to the best of your knowledge. We believe in sex before, during, after marriage. We believe in the therapy of sin. We believe that adultery is fun. We believe that sodomy is okay. We believe that taboos are taboo. We believe that everything is getting better, despite evidence to the contrary. The evidence must be investigated, and you can prove anything with evidence. We believe there's something in horoscopes, UFOs, and bent spoons. Jesus was a good man, just like Buddha, Muhammad, and ourselves. He was a good moral teacher, although we think his good morals were bad. Okay? We believe that all religions are basically the same. At least the one we read was. They all believe in love and goodness. They only differ on matters of creation, sin, heaven, hell, God, salvation. Minor little differences. Okay? We believe that after death comes the nothing, because when you ask the dead what happens, they say nothing. If death is not the end, if the dead have lied, then it's compulsory heaven for all, excepting perhaps Hitler, Stalin, and Genghis Khan. We believe in Masters and Johnson. What's selected is average. What's average is normal. What's normal is good. We believe in total disarmament. We believe that there are direct links between warfare and bloodshed. Americans should beat their guns into tractors, and the Russians would be sure to follow. We believe that man is essentially good. It's only his behavior that lets him down. This is the fault of society. Society is the fault of conditions. Conditions are the fault of society. We believe that each man must find the truth that is right for him. Reality will adapt accordingly. The universe will readjust. History will alter. Just look at the news. Boy, that fits there. We believe that there is no absolute truth, accepting the truth that there is no absolute truth. We believe the rejection of creeds and the flowering of individual thought. Chance, postscript. If chance be the father of all flesh, disastrous is rainbow in the sky. And when you hear state of emergency, sniper kills 10, troops on rampage, whites go looting, bomb blast school, it is but the sound of man worshiping his maker. Wow. Okay, so ideas have consequences. Viktor Frankl, survivor of the death camps, Auschwitz. Actually, he went to several different camps. We're going to get to him in a second. But here's what Frankl said. I am absolutely convinced that the gas chambers of Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Maidanek were ultimately prepared not in some ministry or other in Berlin, but rather at the desk and the lecture halls of nihilistic scientists and philosophers. Now, you notice just prior to that, I had the little in yellow Peter Singer. Anybody know who he is? Okay. He is an ethicist from Australia. His parents survived the Holocaust. So he comes from Jewish background, but he rejected his Judaism. And let me tell you, I have noticed throughout history, whenever someone who is Jewish rejects Yahweh, the results for the rest of the world are always tragic. Karl Marx, he was Jewish, rejected his Judaism. Okay. Sigmund Freud, he's Jewish. He rejected his Judaism. We've been paying the price for both of that for some time. Of course, Gentiles as well. How about Adolf Hitler? Joseph Stalin. Joseph Stalin was a seminary student, rejected his faith in God. Okay, not they ever had one. But, Peter Singer, and this, what he's getting to here, it really frightens me to see what's being taught in academia today. It is truly scary, And Peter, and what is taught in the classroom, I've noticed a decade or two later, it pops up in society around us. Back in the 90s, early 80s, Peter Singer, he's had some pretty prestigious professorships. He's been to Oxford. I think he has some connections with Yale right now. But he wrote that if a baby's born and it survives birth, but it is handicapped, then the mother should have so many months to decide whether or not to terminate the life of the child. Now this is back in the 80s, that he is saying this. And what did we have the governor of Virginia say just a few months ago? That same thing. Of course, Peter Singer isn't really that unique because you go back to the Nazis and you had them systematically killing handicapped and aged people. This is before World War II even begins. I think the number is something like 75,000 German citizens were killed by Hitler before the war ever began because they're either handicapped, or usually mentally, but sometimes physically, and also, if they were too old. An old person, and I'm talking about somebody like Brother Whitehead. You walk in to a doctor and you maybe have a mild cold and they prescribe you some medicine and it's actually poison. All right? Their doctors were instructed to do this. So, but that was a Nazi regime. Here we have in a free society a guy saying we should do this. And now we got a governor saying, yes, we should do this. It's kind of frightening when you think of it. And you don't think worldviews affect us? They definitely do. All right, so something to think about. Now, these are just some of the major worldviews, and I'm sure won't be able to go through all these because I plan to just do one more session on this. But here's the thing. A lot of people say, there's just too many, I can't keep up with this, it's impossible. Well, really there's three. All the others are subsets of the three. Okay? You got theism, and what we're going to focus on is Christian theism, and then pantheism, and then naturalism. If you can get these three down, you should be able to recognize the subsets that come out of these. Now, the one that's the real killer of today, and I hope that's not prophetic saying that, but I can see it becoming that, is postmodernism. And postmodernism is just, it ultimately comes from naturalism, but it has so, to use the evolutionist word, evolution, is so evolved from naturalism that they no longer recognize each other. And this was brought home to me because, postmodernism doesn't recognize the law of non-contradiction even, You actually got some postmodernists who are arguing that 2 and 2 doesn't equal 2. You know? Oh, yeah. I did myself in there, okay. But anyway, I'd be a good postmodernist. But anyway, and this was brought home to me many years ago. We used to have a professor at Blinn, and he was thoroughgoing naturalist atheist, and we totally pretty much disagreed on everything you can imagine, and yet we were friends. Actually, some of you know who I'm talking about. His name, just first name Ashley. He was also friends with Dr. Rambo, and he loved to go after Christians. I mean, especially young Christians who didn't know their stuff. And he would do a lot of this online, and he'd get in arguments on these different boards, and he just loved to eat up, new Christians. And he'd also, all the time be on top of me after me. And I know one time he came by and he was ridiculing me. He says, "I'm the Billy Graham of Blinn College," which is totally ridiculous. But, and I said, "Ashley, you're the Billy Graham of atheism." He said, "You're always trying to proselytize." I said, "Well, what do you think you're doing?" He'd always bring me these articles and stuff. Well, one day he pops in the office and he had this total look of shock on his face. And I said, "Ashley, what in the world's wrong?" He says, "Boy, I got into arguments with somebody. I just don't even know where to begin with them." I said, "What are you talking about?" And he looked at me real funny. He says, "Have you ever heard of postmodernism?" And I laughed. I said, "Ashley, we actually have run into a worldview that we both have a point of agreement on." He says, "What do you mean?" I says, "We both believe in the law of non-contradiction." He says, "Yeah." and this postmodernist just ran circles around him because he didn't know, he'd never run into it before, So we're going to run into it next time, not today. All right, well, anyhow, naturalism. Cosmos, that Carl Sagan's thing really does sum it up. Cosmos is all there is or ever was or ever will be. Just right off the bat, you got a problem here. He's an astronomer. He's supposed to be a scientist, right? Is that a scientific statement? No. What's wrong with it? Yeah, there's nothing scientific about it. What is it? I mean, you can't test it, you can't observe it, you can't repeat it, and yet it must be scientific because Carl Sagan's saying it. And that's one of their number one ploys right there, by the way. All right, but you've got to be real careful with language. If you can set the definition of the terms that you're arguing with, you will win the argument every time. And for one of the big things is Hume redefined miracles. And Christians are eaten up all the time because people use Hume's definition of miracle, and what they don't realize, he's not using a correct definition of miracle, right? And so, that's just one example. All right, theism. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And then pantheism, Atman, the soul is Brahman's soul of the universe. We are all moving towards the one. Okay, well, we're going to hold off on that. And I'm assuming you know most about Christian theism, although we'll run through that as well. But you see, contradicting worldviews cannot all be true. All right? These three are totally in conflict with one another. And you can't say, "Well, I believe all three." No, you can't. You can say it, but it doesn't logically cohere for you to say that. All right, truth by definition is exclusive. Ravi Zacharias said that and has always stuck with me, and it's so very, very true. Okay, now I've got to say something before we start this. This is based on C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. It's a little video, and I would recommend these. There's a little problem with this one. In the book, he uses the word like what he's talking about is how, if you're using false reasoning, it can literally damn you to hell. But the way they did in here, it sounds like they're using damn as almost like a curse word, and that was not Lewis's intent. So I apologize for that. I tried to run this by the elders. None of them were available or something. They didn't reply yesterday. I didn't notice their email. But anyway, just beware of that. The sense that this is supposed to be used is that this reasoning that they're using will damn their souls to hell. Okay, so these are what are known as C.S. Lewis Doodles. And for those of you that are interested in going a little bit further, but you just don't have time to read a bunch of books right now, I would recommend these to you. They're wonderful, little doodles, C.S. Lewis Doodles. And they get across some major points of some of his writings. I do not recommend C.S. Lewis as a theologian, however. Okay, I just want to make that clear. But in terms of defense of the faith, apologetics, worldview, he is excellent. You know, and so, and of course, if you have children, Narnia, Tales of Narnia are wonderful children's books. So, you want to go ahead and just click it? There's a ton of those available on a whole range of subjects, you know, and actually Zach and Hannah discovered these, I guess, when they were in high school, and they got to watching them, and I thought they were, you know, nice little lessons. So, any comments on that before we go forth? How am I doing on time? About out?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. What three views did he cover there?
Pantheism.
Yeah. And well, atheism, actually also naturalism is the same thing. So he covered all three there. Those are the big three. And what I'll propose to do to you next time, I'll probably zero in primarily on naturalism and then postmodernism for next time. And I want you to keep the chart. Are there some still don't have charts back there? And I'm going to bring you a test next time. But it'll be take home. You can cheat with the sheet there. And I just want to give you yourself actually go through the little test and see if you can recognize these, you know. And if you have to use a cheat sheet, go ahead and use cheat sheet. And then bring it back and we'll quickly go over that. But that'll be next time. And I'll probably do that right before I start the beginning of history. In terms of history, I am going to not go all the way back like we did a year previously at the beginnings of Christianity. I think those are recorded. You can talk to James if you want to see those to catch up. I am going to review to set just a base for the major reformers, Wycliffe, Hus, and then of course Luther, Calvin, and then I hope to start talking about how we as Baptists came to be. You know, I think that would be a good lesson, and if we can get that far this summer. And so thank y'all very, very much. Brother Smith, would you close us out, please, sir?